All right, I'm here at MetLife Stadium getting set for the Bills and the Jets coming up on Sunday. It made me think about the first time I covered a Bills game here at MetLife. It was 1989. Now, for a lot of you, you're like, 1989, I wasn't born yet, or I wasn't watching the Bills yet. Well, I was watching them, and I was covering them. And I came here for a game in a season that was really something for the Bills. They were coming off an AFC Championship appearance when they lost to the Bengals, and that next year was rocky. You may have heard of that team. They were called the Bickering Bills. That team had a lot of struggles during the whole year. And it was in December that they were playing here against the Jets. And if you can believe it, a team with all that Bills talent had lost 3 in a row. And they were a mess. And they were in danger of not winning the AFC East. And they came here against a Jets team that was really done. But it's one thing to be done. It's another thing for you to be the ones to put them away. And I remember coming here thinking, how's this Bills team going to be? Because for a month, they looked terrible. Well, they came in here and blasted the Jets. They won 37-0, and they won the AFC East title, back-to-back titles, and they moved on to the playoffs. Now, that was the year they ended up losing to the Browns in that crazy playoff game. And then the next year is when they went on their Super Bowl run. But it was a get-right game for the Bills. Now, that was back in the Marv days. That was before they even started going to the Super Bowl. So a lot has changed between then and now. But I did try to look at the worst losses that McDermott's had since he took over for the Bills. And I was trying to think of games that had some long-range implications. I shouldn't say it that way. That had implications on the season, right? Not just a regular game they played lousy, not a bad team that truth was, it didn't matter if they won or lost. I'm talking about a team that had something to play for or something to prove, played lousy, and then came back. So here's my list of 5, and then how the Bills followed up on it. I think you'll be encouraged by it, and I encourage you to tell me about games you think are big losses and how the Bills responded. So I'm going to start out in 2017. Now, a lot of people, when we talked about the Jacksonville game, talked about the big Bills losses and talked about the home game with New Orleans. Yeah, that was a big loss, but what happened next, I think, was bigger because they went out to San Diego and you guys all know what game it is. It's the Peterman game, right? The 5 interceptions, the disaster out there. And he finally had to put Tyrod Taylor in the game, and the Bills closed it out, and they lost big. The question was, would this rookie head coach lose the locker room? The next week, they were going to Kansas City. And I give LaShawn McCoy a lot of credit, man. He stood up for Peterman. He stood up for Sean McDermott. He stood up, as always, for Tyrod Taylor. And the Bills went the next week to Kansas City to play against Andy Reid and the Chiefs. Now, this was before they had Mahomes. Alex Smith was the quarterback. And the Bills went there and beat them. I mean, and they did it it was kind of a wild game. I wrote down some of the notes. Tyrod Taylor with a TD pass to Zay Jones early on. So there you go, the draft pick coming through. Late in the game, Stephen Hauschka was great in that game. Kicked a couple of long ones. And then if you remember, late in the game, Trey White with a pick that sealed it. They won that game 16-10. The Chiefs were a good team. They were a playoff team. The Bills were young, and they were trying to survive and make the playoffs. It was a huge game long-term for the Bills, and they responded after a really tough loss. So there's number 1 for me. 2019, you guys know I follow the Eagles. You know that team in 2019 was having trouble. But this, again, was an Eagles team that wasn't that far off from playing in the Super Bowl. Wentz was quarterback, and they had come off being blown out a couple of straight games. And they came into Orchard Park, and they did what they don't normally do. They put the ball on the ground, and they ran it. And they ran it, and they ran it some more. And the Bills couldn't do anything to stop them. And the Eagles ended up winning that one 31-13. And I think it shook that Bills team a little bit, the 2019 version of it. So they lost that game. The next week, they were home against Washington. Now, look, that was not a great Washington team. Dwayne Haskins was the quarterback, but the Bills handled them. It's interesting, based on what we're dealing with right now, that the Bills ran the ball a lot in the next game. Devin Singletary got close to 100 yards, and the Bills handled them and fought back, won the game 24-9. And, of course, that Bills team ended up going to the playoffs, needed all those wins, got into the playoffs. We know what happened at the end of the year. But it was a nice bounce back after a loss that during that year started to make you question, man, is this team ready against a good, not great team, but a team that was much more physical than them? And McDermott established a physicality in the Washington game, and they won. The third one was a tough loss, and I remember being at this game in Cleveland. It was that same year, and Baker Mayfield and the Browns had been losing, and they were fired up. A ton of Bills fans made the trip. It was back and forth, and I mentioned Hauschka earlier. Hauschka had a rough game, that one against the Browns. He just couldn't hit from distance. It came late into that game, and the Browns ended up winning it. Well, they took the lead on a late touchdown by Baker, right? So the Bills got the ball back, driving, chance to win, chance to tie. Hauschka, 50-some yards. I think that was the game that sort of proved to this team he didn't have the leg, and he missed it, and the Bills ended up losing that game. But the next week, they went down to Miami, the place they always feel good. Josh Allen, spectacular in that game, 4 total touchdowns. Bills won the game. I think the final score was 37-20. Got them going again. And again, that team ends up making the postseason and going on. So now we'll move to the 2020 year. And when I say bad loss, it's like, okay, obviously the playoff game to Houston was a bad loss. But you had to wait till the whole offseason. So that's not what we're talking about here. We go to the next year. This was last season. And it was that Kansas City game. Because they had lost big with the Titans game. But then they were coming home. I call it the happy hour game, 5 o'clock on a Monday. And Kansas City, again, they were more physical. They ran the ball on the Bills. They never really got to Mahomes. The Bills were in it, you know, but they were never really in it. Kansas City kept them a step back. And the Bills lost that game 26-17. Now, I even had kind of forgotten the order of games, but the next week was right here at MetLife Stadium. And the Bills were not great. They didn't score a touchdown in that game against the Jets. And the Jets defense was okay. Greg Williams was attacking and all. But that was the game. Tyler Bass kicked 6 field goals. Jerry Hughes had huge plays, including an interception late. It was ugly, but they won the game. 18-10 was the final score. And, Hauschka the star, the defense the star, and the Bills were then part of a run. They won 11 of their last 12 and, of course, made it all the way to the AFC Championship game. And then the next game I would say was the worst loss before this Jacksonville game was this year when they opened the year off with the Steelers. And, again, a game where the other team was just more physical. And Pittsburgh beat them up in that second half. And it made us all take a step back. Like, what kind of Bills team do we have now? And again, it was defense and physical play. I remember the offense wasn't that great, but they went down to Miami this year, 35-0, rolled over the Dolphins, and it got them going. So, look, every time the Bills have lost since McDermott's been there, they have not responded with a win. I consider those 5 of the more impactful losses and how this team responded. Look, it's getting dark here at MetLife, so I'm going to close this out in a minute. That was an awful loss in Jacksonville. I tried to ask Josh Allen about this. I said, is this the kind of loss that makes you rethink everything? He said to me, well, you guys go ahead and overthink it. We're not going to do that. I think they will. I think they'll play with a different mindset. I think they've been different all week. They've always responded under McDermott when they've had a bad loss. This was the worst one, in my opinion, in his 5 years with the Bills. I think they're going to respond here on Sunday, but we're all going to find out a lot about this team. Hey, remember always to subscribe, like, comment. We appreciate it. I want your games, your worst Bills losses, and how you think they responded, or what do you think of my list of 5? Make sure you keep it here on the Buffalo Plus YouTube channel. For Dan and Jenna, I'm Mike Catalana. Thanks for watching.